right. So thank you everyone so much for coming for today's first event of the Nepali Digital Literary Festival. So I'm your host, Magna, Dewan, and then today we have Rishi Amatya, who is the author of Radha, The Wrath of Meiju. So may I request Rishi Dai to show his PPT? Yeah, to
PPT.
share.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me share my
Yeah.
PPT.
Yeah.
Give me a minute.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Do it. Let me check if it has been shared. So can you see my screen?
Yes, I'm able to see it.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so hi Rashidai, and it's so good to have you here with us today. And I'm very excited because I did manage to get a copy of your book and also did finish reading it. So it was such an enjoyable read. So let's begin from the very beginning. So I want to know, how did you came upon making Radha, because there's just so much going on in this story, the
Mm.
setting, the characters. So we just want to know what initially started it all.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here. Good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's here. So I was thinking the same thing earlier. I was thinking, like, how should I put it? So the best way to put this is, this story came about after seeing all the destruction in all of the Durbar squares in Kathmandu Valley post 2015 earthquake. And I was at the time volunteering for Kathmandu Valley Preservation Trust, photographing all of the debris that they had salvaged, and they had all collected it in one of the courtyard of Patton Museum. I was helping them to document it by photographing and what have you. And at the time, I was very much interested in travel literature. I still am. And I was thinking of maybe writing a travel literature that would take place in Kathmandu Valley. Maybe the characters would go through the Patan Darbar Square or any of the Darbar Squares, and they'd not only be talking about the history, legend, but also be talking about the architecture, art and architecture that we like kind of lost during the earthquake. So the initial impetus was to write a travel piece based on my own research and experience, and that story kind of snowballed from there is and that's how it became Radhan.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting because, like, actually, the place that you came up with, it's actually a real place. Like, everyone can go there and experience that. So yeah, like what you talked about, like how it came during the quarantine. So I know for a fact that so Radha wasn't just supposed to be a story in the beginning. It was started off as a
Mm,
project that you're doing. So
mm,
so how did you decide that you're gonna make it into a story? Like, because you have had experience,
mm.
researching and writing articles and yeah, about Patan Darbar, right? And about like all the um culture there and everything. But then how did it went from that to being a creative author? How did you came upon that?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. So when I started writing it as a travel piece, it kind of had a life of its own. It took a life of its own. It kind of started expanding into this area, that area. I started adding a lot more characters to it. So all of these characters have their own thing going on. So Dheeraj wanted to, was very much interested in Kartik Nats or Kartik dance. Radha had her own story going. Pratibha had her own thing going on. So I was thinking, maybe the travelogue piece is not working because the travelogue has to have like a very, I would say, a very uh, non-fictionish kind of way to think about what you're telling to your audience. So, and with a travelogue, you can only stretch it as so far. It won't be. It's not elasticy, is what I'm saying. The story is kind of stopped. And then when I started thinking, maybe I should add more components to it. So I was thinking, maybe I should think about adding this piece here, or maybe that piece here, or what if I can add a little folklore that read or heard when I was growing up. So that I wanted to add this, I wanted to add that, and that kind of stretched into a very unfamiliar territory because it was not something that I had previously experienced in writing. I did write about history, I did write about heritage, I did cover a lot of festivals, events, cultural events, but it was mostly grounded on reporting facts without any interpretation from my own side. So I was not adding anything of my own creation. So I was only reporting what was happening, why it is happening, maybe add a history part to this. But when I started writing this story, it kind of took a life of its own, as I mentioned. And then, I just wanted to see where it would go if I start adding this, adding that. And so, yeah, added this, added that, and then it kind of morphed into a story, mostly unconsciously and mostly deliberately as well. A lot of it was like I wanted to see if I added this, where would it go? So, for example, there is this. Let me show you. So this is something that I was very much fascinated about, and I was, huh. And every time I pass this mural in very near to Mangal Bazaar in this gully alleyway called Mamaru Gully, there is this mural that I was endlessly fascinated with. So I was thinking, maybe if I can add some elements of this into the story. And there's another story that I grew up listening to, that this is very right smack in the middle of Mangal Bazaar. This place is called Mani Gufa, and we have like very interesting stories connected to this structure. Very small, very unassuming structures, but the story behind this was very fascinating to me, and it's like, so I was like thinking, maybe if I can mix and match all of these things, then it might result into something interesting, and the something interesting result was the book. Is what I'd like to say.
Right, as you've said that, you started giving life to all of those research things that you initially started with, and then it started becoming a story in itself. And that's really interesting because I feel like all these things that you have mentioned, we can literally go there and we can experience for ourselves, which I'm very excited if the next time I go to Nepal, like I really want to see all of these. But yeah, so let's take a tool to the story in itself, right? So what's really interesting is also the characters, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the characters. Um, so how did you come across, picking Radha as the main character? Because I believe she is a young girl who's like around 9 or somewhere along that age. So
11ish, 10,
yeah.
11ish.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, like, why is she the main character and what is the story behind that, you know?
So when I was thinking of writing a travelogue, I was thinking about exploring the city in a newer way. So I walked through Mangal Bazaar 10,000 times, like all of us have. Like if you're in Nepal, if you've been to this place, you know all of these structures, you know all of the what it looks like. And even if you close your eyes, you can maybe navigate through the place if you have visited the place enough. So I was thinking, maybe what should I add something new that you don't really know of? So my whole idea of writing a travelogue was, maybe I should maybe add an architectural piece or like architectural history, the materials or what have you. And I was thinking of character, like whose voice should I tell the story in? And suddenly something popped in my mind. It was also because I was reading, I was fascinated by a lot of fantasy. And at the time I was reading this series called Discworld by Terry Pratchett. And in that specific series, there is books of this young girl named Tiffany Aching, and I was extremely fascinated by how her story is told, like through the course of couple of books. And I was like, maybe I should also think about writing from a well, not unusual, like a different perspective than a male perspective, because fantasy fiction is chock full of guys saving the world, what have you. And I was thinking maybe I should have a female protagonist too, because one, I was extremely enamored by the idea of writing something similar to Terry Pratchett's Tiffany Aching series, and then I was thinking, maybe the protagonist of my story is a girl, a young girl who is, navigating Mangal Bazaar in her own way, with her uncle telling her the story, not only the story, but actual historical importance behind these structures. And also, it's also a living history and living heritage kind of ideas that I was trying to bring it in. So that idea kind of stuck. I loved having her as a titular character, and she has a noisy young little brother who also mirrors my love for Karthik Nach as well. So I was like, maybe she needs to have a brother who is like nosy, like extremely, interrupting her or this thing. Maybe just as a comic relief as sort. Her uncle Pradeep Thulubai is named after my uncle who told me all of the stories of Mangal Bazaar. So kind of, I knew for sure that there will be a character named Pradeep who will be telling her all of these things, because it was my own Thuluba, my own uncle, in telling me all of these things. So kind of mirrors my own likes and what I wanted to do with the story. So yeah.
Right, that's so interesting. No, but I feel like you've done an excellent job in picking Radha as the protagonist. I feel like she does a really good job in showing her because she's very young, right? I feel like that's one
Mhm.
of the good things about her is that she's very young, and so she's very curious about every single thing here,
Mhm.
as so
Mhm.
as her brother, right? So I feel
Mhm.
like when they
Mhm.
question things, it feels like, we are
Right.
learning through together with
Mhm.
them throughout the story. Yeah, and I want to also discuss this other character called Amog. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so in one part of your story, you kind of mentioned that that he carries a generational trauma like a crown.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm. Mhm.
what can you tell us a little bit more about creating a character who embodies this theme and like what exactly do we mean when we say generational trauma and
Mhm.
um you know, yeah, sort of this character, his essence in general in the story. Yeah.
So I do I do, and I work with Patna Museum and Kathmandu Valley Preservation Trust to put out heritage maps for the kids. And a lot of the work that I do is researching Patton's history, not only architectural history, but political history as well. And not only Patton, but specifically centered around Patton because it is where I am rooted to. And there are a couple of really interesting things that Patton has gone through, especially in terms of political history and what have you, for the past like 1,000 years. So in this 15th, 16th century, when Patton's political leadership changed, they kind of brought their own class of priests, their own class of workers, administrators to, govern, help the kings govern the state. And I was thinking, so maybe when in the early 17th century, when Patton's political landscape changed and when the Mulla kings came in, they usurped power from the people who were already administrating Patton. So I was thinking, and they had their own priest caste. So I was thinking, so if they remove their priest, maybe someone from that extended clan still harboring like ill will against those people who usurp power and threw them out of the prestige point. So I was like, I was thinking, so I was reading the history and I was like thinking in terms of creating the character that had all of those trauma built in because he or she was hearing all of those stories that how they were kicked out from a very cushy job, very like set for life, set for generation kind of job, and then suddenly they find themselves at the other end of the power spectrum, and that idea that they had so much going on and they were ripped apart from kind of lingered in their memory as generational trauma. So I was so Amog is the story. Amog is that person. So in my initial draft, in my first, second draft, Amog, I was thinking, I was gearing to make Amog as the final protagonist, final antagonist. He would be the one who rather would face off. But then in the each successive writing, that didn't felt right for Amog in terms of what he had. It didn't feel closer for me in terms of what his story held and what his potential held for me. So I was thinking, this needs to change. And I hope all of the people who are in the chat with us have had the chance to read the book, because I might be spoiling some of the things. And as we go heavily into our talk, I might be spoiling it left, right, and center. But right now, I'm just keeping it so that I'm not spoiling intentionally. I might unintentionally, but then, so that's how I came up with the idea of Moog. And when I started writing, it kind of made sense to have him as a moral counterbalance to the main protagonist, and it made sense for me to change his course and then break his own generational trauma and then grab his destiny for himself without being bothered by or bearing the burden of his generational trauma.
Right. I think his character is super
Mm,
well done because I feel like adding him into the story is what you said. Like, he brings in this different essence to the side of what we
mm,
know as Barton and, the things that are
mm,
happening. So it's not just like, a travel log. It's not just like, hey, look at this. This is what we have here. This is the heritage. But it's also like, what are some stories that have been created here? What are some things that people have been through here? And politically, historically. And I
mm,
feel like that's really good that Amog is a part of the story because I feel like he brings this other side that
mm,
counterbalances as to just a adventure with Radha, right? And I feel like
mm,
he really brings in the depth of the story. Right. One of the things that I really wanted to ask you about is the Ashwin chapter. So
mm,
basically,
mm,
Dase is a secret ritual, right? So when
mm,
Radha visits to Mulchok, I hope that's not that's not a spoiler. But yeah, what is this experience of writing the scene, right? Like paint us a picture of like why was so significant to put that particular event
mm,
there at that particular time? Like why would you
mm.
pick that particular event and that time, right?
Uh, So when I started writing and decided on naming the chapters with the name of the month, so starts in Baishak, Jyesht, Asar, Shravan, and then in Ashwin, I knew for sure when I would reach Ashwin, I would write that specific instance, because on Ashwin is when the sign falls. So on the
Mm.
ninth night of the sign, on the Navaratri, on the Navami, on the ninth night, the living goddess of Patan is taken to the Mool Chok from her home in Hakabahal here. So on that night, she is welcomed in that particular courtyard with a priest welcoming her, and then she is taken inside a secret, secluded place where they do a lot of rituals and all of that. So I found the process extremely fascinating, because we can see her being worshipped as she enters through the one of the main doors of the Mulchok. She is worshipped, whatever, welcomed, ritually welcomed, and when she goes inside the main sanctum, inside the Mulchoks, the sanctum behind the golden doors, no one is allowed, save for the priests, the extended clan members, and maybe the Kumaris, the living goddesses handlers. No one except them are allowed. And the ritual does not take that long. It's what, half an hourish by the time half an hour it's finished and what have you. But I was extremely fascinated to imagine, like, what what takes place inside, in the inner sanctum of that place. So we know for sure, I've read pieces that says she is welcome there to she is worshipped as an incarnation of Taleju Bhavani, so the main
Mm.
goddesses. and then she is worshipped, welcome, her power gets recharged, what have you, and all of that. And I was like thinking, oh, that that exclusion, that we are not allowed to speak or even talk about, or even the priests don't say what happens. I was just like imagining, that for me was very enticing thing to write about. Like, if I can't see that, maybe I can imagine what happens. And for me, that it's a very pivotal moment in Radha's story, because at that time she understands or has the clarity to solve the problems, or
Mhm.
to face the obstacles that she has in front of her. That kind of strengthens her resolve, and then gives her the confidence to do so. And that for me was the pivotal chapter for me to write. It's like, oh yes, now our protagonist has found a voice, or the reason, or the strength that she needs to get this done.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mm.
definitely, definitely. I feel like I do agree. I feel like that was a part like the story started getting more and more interesting, and then it's like very exciting. Like what's gonna happen next? What's gonna take place? So, speaking of imagination, so one of the things that I have heard, that you also kind of talked about was, um, how your book was initially divided into two arcs, right? So the first three chapter was the first arc, and then oh sorry, first four chapter were the first arc, and then the last three chapters were the second arc. So so the last three chapters, like you told me that you faced a sort of dilemma because you weren't sure if you should just use the established concept of Newa culture and what it was already been established, or that you should, invent your own rule, go with the flow, imagination. So, how did you end up choosing your way, and what was the challenge like, and how did you push through that?
So I wrote the entire story in like couple of stages. I pushed through first four chapters in, I think, 2017, 2018. And for the longest time, I had no clue from where to go, like how to go on about it. I knew that where I wanted to reach. So if you read the book, something very important takes place in the fourth chapter. And I knew what need needed to happen to resolve all of the loose threads that happens in chapter 4 by the time we hit chapter 4. But I had no idea how to get there, because as you rightfully mentioned, all of the worlds, all of the, especially the Trayodasha Bhuvana that I mentioned, that is very important to the story, has its own logic, has its own way of
Mm,
functioning. So for example, if you read Buddhist literature, other literature, you would have an understanding what the world means. So Trayodasa Bhuvan means 13 worlds. So they would have their own logic of like their own physics or what have you. So if you read a lot of fantasy and fiction, all of the imagined worlds will have their own set of grammars that they run, abide by the rules, the grammars, or laws. If in it's if this is a place, if you drop a ball, does it go down or go up, that kind of way. So
mm,
physics, all of it will have their own internal logic that binds those worlds. And for me, it was very difficult for me to get out of the mindset, because when I written like the four chapters, I was not sure if I should keep following the already existing way, already existing logic that these world already have. If I had done so, then I had no idea on how to resolve the loose ends of the story. I had no idea how to go on about it. So when I wrote the draft, even after sleeping on it for like two something
mm,
years, I had no like visible way out of it. And when I was discussing this with an editor, I said like, look, this is where I'm stuck at. I know how it should end, but I can for the life of me find out a workaround to describe this. Like, how should we go on about, how should I go on about it? I know what happens, I know what it needs to happen to tie all of these loose ends, but I'm not sure which way should I go. Should I stick
mm,
to the conventional logic system of the already established world, or establish something of my own? And I was very hesitant to do it at first, and my editor said something that you know, was a very light shed moment for me. He said, like, this is your world. You've invented this. You can add your own logic to it as long as the story um story resolves interestingly in a very predictable manner. It's okay, you can do your own stuff. So that kind of opened my a lot of possibilities for me to play with. So I was like, huh. So I didn't I was what I was doing earlier was I was shackling myself with the belief that I needed to be confined to this reasoning, and that I did not have the permission to go beyond it. But what my editor said is like, no, it's your world, it's your creation. You can do whatever you want as long as the internal logic holds. If you can justify it, if you can reflect those justification, all of those ramification in your story, in your narrative. If it makes sense, if it works, it works. Just go on about it. So that kind of opened up my, it's like, oh, suddenly I found myself freer of all of the chains that I would shackle myself in. It's like, oh yes, that's how I needed to do. That's
Mm.
how I need to go. So so after that conversation, the writing the second arc was very easy and very much fun because I was inventing things or adding new logic to the already existing program to, serve my narrative. And it since it's my book, it kind of made sense for it to go in the ways that I wanted to go in and not stick to something that had already
Something.
existed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. So,
Mhm.
that makes me wonder, like, what do you have to say to other aspiring writers, like, who also want to bridge, folklores with their own
Mhm.
interpretation? Yeah, what do you think would be the best advice to go forward?
I would say, as long as we are not trampling down on sentiments, as we are not, you know, um, discarding centuries worth of practices and just taking away with the concept or appropriating it or,
Mm,
taking it, slandering it or looking down upon it, if that you definitely should not do that. But as long as you're true to the core story that you're borrowing from, adding to it, appreciate, showing your appreciation by adding to it, and then not depreciating it. I think go run with your thing. But also, one of the things that I found was that having initial readers to read through your work, people
mm,
who from the same of belief system or
mm,
from the same background read through your story and give their own critical feedback to it, and also taking it to improve your work is also very important. So I find having trusted first readers and then editors who can see through your work and see if you are overstepping your boundaries or critically using it or slandering. I think that kind of extra pair of eyes is always welcome, but give yourself the permission to do it, and then also give yourself the permission to edit it if it does
mm.
not work out, and also
Yeah,
be and also have someone read through your work. Like having working with an editor is extremely important, specifically if that cultural aspect is different to you or alien to you or that you don't really know about. I think having people from that same cultural background look at it and see if that works or not is very important.
yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with you. I feel like sometimes it could be sensitive, right? Like
Mhm.
certain topics. But in the same time, I feel like, as a creative writer, at the end of the day, it is about also adding our interpretation, and that's quite important as well in building a world. So I don't know if you've been wondering this, but I have. And part of our theme for our digital literary festival is also about Nepali culture. And I feel like Nepali culture, like we have so many different, beautiful, beautiful cultures. So I just wanted to ask a question. Like, why do you think it's so important to tell these stories of local history and indigenous cultures as well as folklores? And, I feel like there has been an
Mhm.
increasement of this in the recent past years, whether it's in writing stories. as well
Mm.
as our movies, our songs. I feel like there's a lot more representation of different indigenous cultures. So I feel like
Mhm.
as someone who has also written about your indigenous culture and folklore, so I want to ask, why is it so important to tell this story? And yeah, and also like folklores and stuff. Yeah.
I have like two ways
Yeah,
two answers to that. One, to put it very bluntly, if you don't write it, someone else will come and write it.
true. Yeah.
But then you might not really like it.
Mm,
So my another point is that, so, for example, if you look into popular media, if you critically look at all of the popular media, especially films and fantasy and what have you, you'll see one thread that binds or ties to it. So, for example, let's say, since I come from a lot of comic reading background, so if you look at comics, you'll see comics like Thor, like Norse mythology, and
mm,
you'll see, for example, how should I put it, so a lot of films based on Egyptian mythologies, The Mummy Returns, The Mummy, what have you,
mm,
and a lot of it is borrowing from these very rich culture, very rich fantasies, mythologies. And I had always wondered, so we keep on, we Nepali, but what I found was that we keep telling that Nepal is such a rich cultural country with
mm,
so many stories. But I used to wonder why are our stories not in those popular mediums?
mm,
We can't really see it in screens. It's not in comics. It's not on films. It's not on anywhere. Like, why isn't there any interpretive works of our culture? So I was like, I would always say when I was talking with my friends or writers, whatever, I was always say like, someone needs to write something on this. Someone needs to do something, mash up all of the things that we already have, and then maybe make up a new interesting work. And then I realized maybe that somebody could be me. But I only realized it like when I was like halfway through the book. When I was doing like second draft version of Radha. I was like, huh? Maybe I am turning into somebody that I hoped would write something on our culture. So, and it was easier for me to write on Neva culture because of two things: because of access to the place, because I am a Neva myself, access to the place. Patan Darbar Square is very near from where I live, like 2 minutes walk. A lot of my work is right now like centered in and around Patan Darbar Square. So I do a lot of research around that place. So I had that access to the place, to the stories, and I thought, if I'm sitting on all of this, maybe I should do something. So I started writing. So people, if you have access to your own cultural stories from your own cultural background, folklores from your place, rooted to your place, maybe I think we should start writing about that as well.
mm,
Maybe add a new lease of life to these stories. I don't mean it in that you need to retell the same story, but maybe add your own spin to it, like stories with each retelling, like adds more oxygen to the tale. It spreads everywhere. So I think that's important for us to not only be a passive consumer of our cultural, but also see if we can add something to it. I think that's what motivated me to write in the first place. And I highly encourage other people, if they have something similar and if they are waiting for someone to write something on about them, maybe you should, they should, should just
yeah.
take a pen and start pounding away. Yeah.
Right. I definitely agree. I definitely do. I feel like, like what you said, if not us, then who would, right? And I feel like if you have the accessibility
Mhm.
from the culture, and if you know someone who knows about these stuff, I feel like it would be
Mhm.
better because I feel like whatever people have been access to, then they would be more likely to go after that. For instance, like as you've mentioned, the Norse mythology or Egyptian culture. I feel like this has been portrayed in many, many movies, films, stories, and that's why we're so familiar with them, even though our ancestor has nothing to do with these
Mhm.
cultures. And I feel like it is our responsibility to also bring our culture forward, our folklores forward. And I feel like literature is amazing way to do that. Films, songs, I feel like these are really interesting way to do that. So, that being said, I feel like we're right on the dot of the Q&A session. So, yeah, so I feel like what we can do is that we can either have a hand raised up or we can have questions from the chat box and then we will just go through a few of them. I feel like we should be able to go through at least
Mhm.
like, a couple of them. So, shall we do that? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So if you guys have a question, could you raise up your hand? You can
Mhm.
ask to unmute yourself, and then our moderator will do that. Or you can also just send in us questions in the chat box and we can just go through that. So yeah.
So while we wait, I think not a question, but I think yeah, there's a question.
Mhm.
While process. That's a very good question. Writing process. How do I write? Um, hmm. At times, it was not really a burden because I was enjoying making things up. But then, yeah, sometimes it can be burden because you if you have if you have something like I need to write 1,000 words and then the words are not flowing and that might be a burden. I'm working on something right now where I've set myself like every time if when I sit to write I need to write or like every section needs to be 1,000 words, and I'm finding that to be a burden. So it's like how should I hit that 1,000 words mark? But I think if you enjoy making things up, I think yeah, it was interesting for me. It interesting for me to write this, and I really love the writing process. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. And the mural is in Chinnamasta Shrine. It's adjacent to the very famous Nanda Mithai Pasal in Chinnamasta in the Mamaru Gully. It's actually the mural portrays. This is a mural which was redone. Sorry, um, redone after the 2015 earthquake because it was cracked during the 2015 earthquake, and this is um, a newer work over and then but the older mural was more sinister looking than this. This is slightly cutesy looking, but what is going on here is the lady in the middle who has a man in on a leash. She is going to sacrifice that person to gain power. So for example, dark art, so that's a very tantric practices. So if you want to read, you can read about Chinnamasta and the Chinnamasta called the tantric practices called, and that the old lady, you don't really see, but you can see her raising a finger like that, but you don't really see what she is doing with that finger. So she has a fire, a light on her fingertip like this. You can only see her raised index finger, but you don't really see the flames. But so what she's doing is she is lighting the way by, putting the flame on her index finger. So that's a very tantric practices, and I would, request you to read on about it. It's very fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating, especially about like the idea of sacrifice, whom to whom the person is being sacrificed to, who is doing the sacrifice. So the lady is the man's wife, so she is sacrificing her husband is what I can tell. And then I hope it'll give you an enough interest to do a more research about it, thorough research about it.
I think we have one more question by Yoshi D right here.
Mhm. Oh, that's a very good question. Oh. One of the things that was very interesting for me was that so even in research, there are like two streams of research that I found when I was researching this book. One was like very academic style of reaching research, where they said like this structure was made in this style, this happens here, that happens here, and the other research is specifically folk tales and cultural stories or even oral history that people remember. So that's this structure Manigufa is a very non-descriptive building in Patandara Square, and while there is no much written or documented history about this place, from the oral stories, that's what I found out, or what people say about this place is that this place used to be a like literal a cave. The Moni Gufa is literally cave. So what they say was that this was where a portal to the another world opened up. So, and this was accessed only for like specific tantric practitioners who had enough siddhi. So, siddhi means power. So, enough powers to unlock the gate to travel anywhere they wanted. So, that for me was very fascinating in a way. Like, even in a main bustling place like this, you'd still have something, a simple looking building with a sinister story tied to it. And another thing was this shrine. This shrine is of Chandeswari shrine in Bimbahal. So if you've been there, you can clearly see there are two inner sanctums in this temple. So one to your right, one to your left. The left one is locked, and it is very unusual in that the person who built this shrine, as the story goes, wanted to become a deity himself. So he wanted to defy yeah, yes, I think that's the pronunciation. He wanted himself to be a god, and when he became a god, he wanted himself, the statue of himself, to be enshrined in that empty sanctum. And the story behind it kind of also informed the main protagonist of my story. So those kind of stories was very interesting, like research was very interesting that I found during my research for this book. Okay, could be. There was
I
a
think we have another question.
Yeah, there was a mention about not being core and creative. Oh, that's a very good question. What's the core? I think the core is something that you do not want. And the core is it made up of boundaries that you do not want to cross yourself. For me, that would mean not writing negatively about living traditional or cultural practices, for sure. That's the boundary that I refuse to cross, and not having any derogative meaning or derogative insidious marks or insidious comments about that practices that is still continuing. Yeah, that I think that's the core for me. So for example, if I want to give an concrete example, was that how do I give the concrete example? So if you read the book, I have not and negatively portrayed any of the cultural elements that is still being practiced. So, for example, living goddess practices, the Kartik Nach, or all the other traditions. That for me was a solid no-no. That's a boundary that I'm not willing to cross. So that kind of boundary formed my core. So I think for you that might be different, as you rightfully pointed out. There are so many different cultures, so many belief systems, and what constitutes your core might be difficult to what constitutes mine. And I think having a fresh pair of eyes, if you're writing outside your culture, having a fresh pair of eyes from that people of that culture read your work critically and give you feedback is something I think is important to see that you are not crossing that kind of boundary. So yeah. So sometimes for me, for us, when you are from one culture, you kind of know what your boundaries are. For if I'm writing about someone else's culture, something that is different or newer to me, I might not have the nuances to grasp it. So things having someone to read your work and also read extensively about that culture is also very much important for me to have an informed opinion about what I can do and what I cannot do. Oh, that's a good question. Uh,
Yeah.
just
I
evolution of
think that.
storytelling in Nepal. Yeah. Oh, that's a very good question. I think a lot of us are trying in a lot of different ways. So, for example, the contemporary art scene, the contemporary photography scene is evolving with so many brilliant storytellers, and not only in writing. There are a lot of experimentation is going on in all of the contemporary forms of art. So, I think Photo Kathmandu is happening in November. So, if you go there, you'll see a lot of newer ideas, fresh ways of telling stories, fresh ways of making music. So, if you've been to Kathmandu or Jazz Mandu or Cat Jazz Festival. And I think a lot of newer ways of being, to tell a story by various means. So, for example, music videos, writing, painting, a lot of thing has been coming up. And I think I see a lot of interpretive work where people are not only passively consuming your work but also adding meaning in their own ways is what I see what I see going forward as per as the evolution of storytelling in Nepal. Yeah, a lot of different voices, a lot of newer voices with bold experimentation, a lot of interesting groundbreaking work. I think one of the things that I want to point out is if you've been following Asim Sakya in YouTube, he's making a video game on his own, one man army. If you should see his work, and the work that he does is absolutely amazing, and that I'll tell you. So if you should definitely check his work out, and other so many brilliant artists and storytellers and painters. So definitely lovely works coming up. Let me write that down. Asim Sakya. Yes, it I am. Hmm. Plays a significant impact to what unfolds through their work. Ah, that's a very good question. I don't think. Where do I see self? I I think I see myself most as an observer of all of the things that's happening. I'm not an anthropologist, but I have a keen interest in observing things and then I think that I'm really good at. I think all writers are, all introverts are, not participating, but just seeing, observing, and then taking all of those materials for your story. I think for me, I think that's where I position myself, an observer, like casual observer, and then, going off or going on to research from what I've observed. So yeah, that's I think where I'll position myself. Like in the middle, somewhere in the middle.
So, do we have any more questions? Is there any more questions? You guys can also raise your hand in case you want to speak up. Let me see. I think that's about. Oh, there's one more
Mhm.
question. Yes, there's there's one.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, that's an absolutely loving character. Lovely question. I think, as you mentioned, I love exploring characters, like not only male characters, but also I was thinking if the main protagonist is female character, I think I should also needed to balance it out by not balance it out, but need to explore more stronger and female character who is an antagonist. But I don't think when I was writing this book, I was my craft was up to that point to write more strong female character, which I think I would need to research, need to train myself on writing a more interesting character. But I hope in the coming works I will definitely do that. But the inspiration to write about a strong female character comes to not only from seeing very strong female characters, like female inspirations in my life, but also to see like where can I take this idea and see if that works or not. And I basically needed a strong female badass character, so that's the reason for me.
Yeah, I think that's all the time we have for the Q&A. So before we leave, though, I do want to ask you one last question, and oops, sorry. Am
Yeah.
I sharing my screen?
No, I am.
No. Oh, okay. No, because I wanted to share a
uh,
doc. Oh, where is it?
let me unshare my and then you can
Oh,
share it.
okay, okay, okay.
Let me yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
Is it? I'm gonna, yeah. So before we end, I just wanted to let everyone see that. I also ended up putting the QR code here. So if you guys are interested in reading Radha and you have not done that, please, please do it. It is a story that will take you on an adventure. And on top of that, you can definitely look at all of those monuments, when you're traveling to Nepal, or if you're in Nepal, then like every other time. Um, yeah, but one question that I wanted to ask before we end this entire session is that what is next for you? So, what is your future writing projects, or like, can we see a sequel, or what is it? What is the future projects that you have at the moment?
So couple of things. So one, I am writing a non-fiction graphic uh, history, history and all of those of Bungodya, the chariot festival of Ratu Machindranath. This festival has been ongoing from the 7th century, and I'm writing a non-fiction illustrated work on this. So I'm very excited on that. I'm collaborating with two like really stellar artists for that. Another fiction graphic novel or comic project that I'm doing is I'm continuing my work with Prakash Ranjit to write Haku Bhutmali, or the Black Kite, that a series that I started in the middle of the pandemic in 2020. So I'm rewriting that. And well, since you've asked, I think I also wanted to mention specifically that I am right now in the middle, in the starting of writing a sequel to Radha. So there's that, something that I'm very excited
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, oh my God, I can't wait, right? So this is literally like everyone's sign to
Mm.
go out there and grab your series one so that
Oh yeah,
you'll
yeah.
be right in time to be,
Yes.
you'll be right in time for the next sequel. And I'm very excited to read this, like, right? Like I want to know what her adventure is, the next adventure. That's going to be really interesting. Like the thought that I get when I read this book is like Rick Riordan's like Percy Jackson. Like it kind of gives me that mythology and then adventure, and then you're also learning about all of these folklores and whatnot. So
Mm.
yeah, like I'm so excited. So I think should we end the meeting for our very first event? Right?
Yes. I
Yeah.
think we
All
covered a
right.
lot. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you for such lovely questions. I think that's very, very thoughtful questions. I
Mhm.
loved it. I loved all of this. Oh, wow.
Right. Right. I feel like the questions that the audience gave us was even better than the ones I had prepared.
No,
Yeah,
this is
but
lovely question. Yeah.
yeah. So in case you guys are interested in other of the festival events, so we will be having it continuously starting from next week. So most of them are in during weekends. So you can just go to our, Instagram page and take a look at all of the other events. And right, our next event is going to be with Dr. Satyadeep Chetri, and we'll be looking onto Gorkhaland identity. So I'm very excited for that one as well.
Super excited.
So thank you so much for attending this, and I'll see you guys next weekend. And yeah, thank you so much for thank you so much for coming here as well, Rishidai. Like that's so nice. And thank you so much for talking about your book.
Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, if you don't already follow me, I do a lot of do a lot of talks, especially heritage tour around Bungadio. So if you follow me on Instagram, I post dates and whatever where you can sign up. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.